Hello everyone and welcome back to some more Pokemon analysis. If you have not seen the first part of this video, I do suggest that you do that now rather than wait and see what happens in this video. So go ahead and watch the first video now if you have not watched it. Anyways, let's continue on with the story. So let's see, what else can we talk about? Oh yeah, the Elite Four. As I said before, it's the same Elite Four, but not the same members though. My guess is a lot of them left after you defeated them in the first games. One of them is actually Koga, who was a gym leader in the first generation. The champion this time is, big surprise, Lance. After you get into Kanto, things are actually different. I mean, from the first generation game to the second generation game. It has been 3 years in both the games and in real life, so we did kind of expect a change. And Kanto does have changes from little to small. For example, besides the gym leaders being a little older, some of them are actually replaced. For example, Koga has his daughter in charge of the gym, and Blue takes over the 8th gym. Which, by the way, did anybody notice the Earth badge is a feather, yet the Earth badge is supposed to be for ground types? So what's up with that? Why is it a feather? It's the exact opposite. Also, Cinnabar Island has been destroyed. A volcano apparently erupted and took it all out, besides for a Pokemon Center or something like that. So now Blaine is over at the Seafoam Islands. Other NPCs are different too. For example, in the Fighting Dojo, the leader left to train in Mount Motar that's in Johto, and some shops and stuff are closed, such as the bike shop. Oh, and Viridian Forest has been chopped down. Gee, what kind of message is that sending to little kids? Anyways, there's also a new magnet train that can instantly take you from Johto and Kanto, which is convenient in case you don't want to fly between the two. Also, the tower in Lavender Town, which had deceased Pokemon, has been replaced by a radio tower of its own, and doesn't let people go in above the first floor due to what they heard happened in Johto with Team Rocket. Same with Sylph. After what happened in Team Rocket in the first generation, they do not let you above the first floor, which kind of sucks, but I mean, you do have to understand, and at least they were taking into consideration there were games before that. And this is why in the beginning I said it was a direct sequel. Another thing that's new to this generation is the legendary Pokemon. If you recall, back then it was simple. Here there are two Pokemon on the cover of the games, Ho-Oh and Lugia, and they play a major role, or at least they're supposed to in the story. Along with them are Suicune, Entei, and Raikou. The story goes that these two lived in the towers, and by these two I mean Ho-Oh and Lugia, the Brass Tower and the Silver Tower respectively. However, the Brass Tower was burned down and many Pokemon died. Ho-Oh brought them back to life as Suicune, Entei, and Raikou, and these three beasts ran off to Rome. Lugia left for the Whirl Islands as, I don't know, I guess it likes to be around water more, and Ho-Oh also roamed around, both waiting to meet a person with a good heart, or something along those lines anyway. There's some more to it, but that's all you basically need to know. It's all in a nutshell. I do like this idea, and it adds to the legend part of the story. I mean, it's kind of a question if they really existed or not. And people see them, but it's never been really recorded or anything like facts. Finally, at the very end, you can climb Mount Silver. Man, this game is full of silver. At the very top, it's none other than Red, who after becoming champion apparently came up here to train. He's the single most toughest trainer ever in the game, reaching almost level 90. The sad thing is he says nothing. He just starts the battle and bam, you're left to struggle for a while. And after the battle, he says nothing and he leaves. After the credits play for the second time, we indicate that this is the real final part of the game. After that, there really isn't much you can do, and all in all, the fastest I've beaten this game is about in 3 days. And after playing all day long, it's still much longer than the first one, and the total play hours I came to was about 30 some hours. This game is great and has a fantastic nostalgic value for myself, and I think it's much better than the first generation. However, we aren't done with this analysis yet. Let's talk about Crystal and the remakes. Crystal is probably my favorite game of the whole series. This also includes the newer games. It's not a whole lot different than Gold or Silver, but it's just awesome for, I don't know, whatever reason. I just like it more. There is a new plot involved, however, but it's not a totally new plot. It's more of a different plot. This time a man named Yusin is totally looking for Suicune, and why is he looking for Suicune? I don't know. And why is it more important than the other two beasts? I'm not sure. Suicune also takes note of the player, which, by the way, in Crystal you can for the first time choose to be a girl, so yay! Anyway, Suicune spots us for the first time in the game, and we need to catch it. Well, we don't need to, but we can catch it. Well, anyways, it just seems weird that they would put Suicune as the main part of the plot. At the very least, I would expect Celebi to be the mascot for this sort of thing, and the plot to revolve around Celebi a little more. But Suicune? Why him? Why not Raikou or Entei? And what's more, why not all three of them? Wouldn't that be cool and interesting if the three beasts followed you around and would help you throughout your journey? But no, we get some other story thing. Besides that, I don't really think there's any differences in Crystal. Sure, there are some small things, but I don't think it's anything worth mentioning. Besides the battle tower, there is a battle tower that you get to go to at the end of the game, and it does hold up some post-game value. So if you don't have anything to do after the game, at least you can go ahead and do this. The remakes are also include Crystal, as they are a remake of the whole second generation, I guess. So Yusin and Suicune and the whole subplot is back along with the original story. The remakes look nice, but it has some annoyances. For example, the game is much more touchy because it's on the DS, compared to Platinum, where it wasn't that involved, but now it gets kind of annoying. There are some differences, such as the kimono girls playing a much larger role and some other stuff I won't get into as well. These remakes were really needed, as it is hard to get any good Johto Pokemon in the later games, especially the starter Pokemon. It was refreshing, but at the same time I felt, well, robbed of my money after I played it. For example, the big thing that they used to make this game look attractive was having your Pokemon following you around, like Pikachu did in Yellow version. This was neat, but it's just eye candy. The music also feels, well, kind of bad. In the first generation remakes, the music was up to date, yet still keeping that same awesome tone that we loved so much when we first played the games. Here it feels like a completely new soundtrack. Granted, some tracks are done beautifully, such as the Rival theme or Team Rocket's bass. Those are just really, really good, and I encourage you all to listen afterwards. However, other tracks such as the Lance theme battle, well, they seem lacking. I guess I was just expecting more. You can also get a Game Boy player in the game, which what it does is plays the original music from the Generation 2 games. This, however, seems like they put the new music into some program that makes a Game Boy version of the new songs, rather than getting the original tracks. It sounds kinda choppy, and yeah, you don't even get the item to the very, very end of the game. So what's the point? There aren't any more events so you can compare the two tracks at this point, so that's really lame. After beating Red, who is much tougher in this game by the way, you do get one of the Kanto starters and one of the Hoenn starters. All in all, I do like the remakes for this generation, but it's not the same as the original ones. I mean, of course they're remakes, but they just sort of stray off a little bit. I mean, they even replaced the playable girl with another playable girl, and I'm not complaining. I mean, I do like the new one a lot, but why did they have to do that? Why did they find that necessary? Also, because it's from Generation 4, you can evolve your Pokemon to new evolutions that did not exist back then. The Pokedex is even longer, featuring some of the new evolutions, and that's pretty cool, but it doesn't have all of them, so that's kind of lacking as well. As I mentioned earlier, the gym leaders and the rematches do get an upgrade from Generation 4 into their teams, and the gym leaders themselves get a whole new look, and they look great, mainly Sabrina and Misty. As far as Generation 2 goes, I love it. It's a great game, it's a great sequel to the first generation, and it's worth it playing it every single time I play it. Yes, it does have its goofy moments and its pointless plot tie with Team Rocket, but other than that, we find a more serious, longer, more fun adventure than we did in the first game. Everything the first game was missing, I felt this game had. It was memorable, awesome, epic, stark, serious, fun, and even after you beat it, you didn't mind having to beat it all over again, because it wasn't annoying or anything. It just reminds us about our childhood whenever we play this game, and that's why I love Generation 2 so much. But before I end the Generation 2 analysis, however, allow me to give some history on what was going on at this time. When Crystal was released in July of 2001, if you recall, the Game Boy Advance was already released about a month earlier, so a lot of people didn't really pay attention to this game, even though you could still play old Game Boy games with the new Game Boy Advance. Keep in mind as well that the Generation 1 came out in 1998. What does this mean? Well, by the time Crystal came out, the people who played Pokemon were growing up. The kids who played it were around the age of 10 or so. So by this time, kids were about 13 or 14 years old, and they were in middle school and entering their teenage years. These kids started forgetting about Pokemon, and they discovered new things, not to mention that the internet was getting more and more popular. So the games were losing the people who knew about Pokemon and played them years back. You could say a younger audience was around for Generation 2, but again, things were changing. The new generation of kids had the Game Boy Advance already, so they didn't even need the Game Boy Color. So they played all the advanced games everybody loves, and they didn't really play the Game Boy Color games. It's kind of like today in the year 2011, just in case anybody watches this in a different year. It's really hard to find any GameCube games or PlayStation 2 games, and if we do find them, we find them cheap. And who buys them? People who want it for nostalgia, or people who played them a long time ago and want to play them again. Granted, 3 years isn't that long, but this is when technology started taking over with young people, and this is around year 2000, 2001 or so. So Crystal wasn't as popular as Gold and Silver and not as memorable, despite it even being closely to the same thing. And it was a whole 3 years before the US would see the next Pokemon generation. So yeah, that's about 6 years in total from the first generation to the third generation gap that we were already losing interest. So people got bored and they moved on. Well, how do I know all of this anyways? Because it happened to me in Generation 3.